Guys, if you're watching this, you're probably in the same boat as my son and your Infinity G37 or your Nissan 370Z won't start. Well, what's an indication that you need a starter? There's a few, but the big one is, and I'm gonna show you right now, that your car essentially doesn't start. So, listen carefully here. Hear it click. Hear it one more time. Now, if your car won't start and let's say you don't hear the click, it could be a park brake switch, it could be a lot of things. It could be a connection issue, a fuse issue, it could be a signal issue from the ignition, it could be a security issue. However, if you hear that click, I don't know if you guys could hear it over the birds. If you hear that click, it's probably a good chance it's your starter. You can get under there, try and hit your starter with a hammer, although it's in a shitty location, and see if you can get it started. Now, I already know this car needs a starter because I already went through that whole process. So we're gonna put a starter in it today, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do that in like 10 easy steps. This is a bright day. It's pretty easy to do a starter in these cars. It's not the easiest car to do a starter in, but it's not bad. And we're gonna get into it right now. Step one, and very important for safety, tire chocks. Step two for safety, park brake. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, Steve, why do I need a park brake and tire chocks when the car is already in park? Aha, good question. This car, as soon as you lift it, any front wheel drive car, as soon as you lift the car, even though it's in park, it's no longer in park. It's gonna wanna roll away on you or back or whatever. This car is all wheel drive. Doesn't really apply, but whatever. For sake of argument, safety wise, always chalk, always e-brake, no matter what. Next step, pop the hood and go to your battery cover. And we're going to take off the negative post on the battery with that 8mm right there. And when I said 8mm, I meant 10mm. Now we want to jack the car up. Now, you want to get it relatively high because 90% of what we're doing is under the car. You're gonna have to fit your fat ass under there. So we're gonna have to get this pretty high. So I'm gonna show you guys where to jack. On a car, you have structural and non-structural parts of the car. Looking under the car, back here is your frame. So you can jack there. This is the pinch weld. You can jack here. I wouldn't highly recommend it because if there's any rust there, it's gonna crumple. But your frame should be nice and strong. So you can jack right there. So I do have this side a little bit higher. We will be working under the side of the car. Safety is your best friend. So I have the jack stand under there on both sides. And then I also put the floor jack under with just a little bit of pressure on it to try and take some of the weight off there and keep it up in the air. So next up, we're going to remove our tire. Take off these bolts, or sorry, take off these nuts, remove the tire. Got our 21mm here. Take all these off so we can remove the tire. Now your starter location, looking from the driver's side of your Infinity G37, is behind the steering knuckle, back there. So it goes from right there to right there. All right, next step in the Infinity starter replacement is we're gonna remove this. You don't have to remove this. Some of you may not even have this. It's fallen off over years, but we're gonna remove it, and it gives us a little bit more room to get our extra hand in there when we're trying to manhandle the starter out, because it is a tight spot. So trying to do this left-handed, and we'll remove this. If you don't have one of these, my neighbor actually was just over here and said he's used a hammer before and clawed to pull it out. So I don't know, take that with a grain of salt. I've never tried it, but anyway, we'll pull this out. All right, next step in starter replacement is we have our electrical end of things. So we have our exciter wire right back there, this one. Can you see that? Right here, undo that connector. And then up here under this, we're gonna have that 12 or 13 mil nut, and that is our battery supply wire. So we'll take those off. So looking from under the car, I thought I'd point out, to get the electrical connector off the exciter wire, you push this tab right here. So this male end goes into this female end, and you want to push right here and pull backwards at the same time. It came out of that connector on me back there, but usually it'd be secured right there like that. Okay, next is the battery supply. All right, we got a battery supply wire off. It's 12 mil. I used a ratchet wrench, and all I did was I fed the ratchet wrench through here, and then over here I just pushed up on it and ratcheted it off, took my fingers, loosened it off, pulled it off, and I tucked it off to the side. Next up is where things start to get interesting. So going under the car. Going under the car, we have, I believe these look like a 14 mil, one here and one here. And it's hard to tell if those two actually go into the starter, but we definitely have this one and this one to take off, and then we'll move the starter back. If it doesn't move, we have these others to take off. Actually, yeah, I don't know, we'll see in a minute. All right, so it's a 14 mil. I've got a deep socket on there to get a little bit more room, and then we'll take these, get that out of there. We'll take this 14 and that 14 out. I don't think those ones are into the starter at all because the starter solenoid's over here. So should be just that one and that one. And then we're gonna try and take the starter out. I suspect we're either gonna have to jack up the engine or remove the steering column or both, but we will see when we get there. Anyway, I'll get these out. All right, well, I've got the starter out and I need just like a 1/4 inch more room. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the steering shaft knuckle off. Now, you wanna make sure your steering wheel is absolutely straight, and then you wanna mark this in a couple locations before you take it off. It is splined, but if you're one spline off, your steering wheel won't be straight. So we'll get that done here. So I've got the 12 mil on here. I'm just gonna take this out and then I'm gonna mark it and make sure that we put it back in the exact same spot on the exact same splines. That way we don't have any problems. You can actually, let me do that real quick and show you here. What you can actually do, because I just did this, is loop your seatbelt through your steering wheel like that, and that'll help prevent your steering wheel from going anywhere. It kind of did turn sideways, but we know it's not going anywhere. And just like that, you have your starter out. Now, if you're wondering how a starter works or how to test it, kind of a quick and dirty would be, the starter is grounded by itself through the engine block. You have a constant supply of power coming from your battery to that battery post up there, maybe it might be down there or whatever, and then the battery goes from the solenoid to there. Now you have your exciter wire. I'm gonna try and do this with one hand. If you turn your key, it supplies power to the exciter wire. So if this were your key and it was coming off the starter relay, it would supply power. Now what you want to see is this solenoid jump out and spin. This will spin your flywheel, which spins your engine, right? So key on, start. That's not going to start an engine. So this starter is definitely toast. It should be spinning 100 times faster than that with way more torque. So that's a good sign. Now for comparison and the sake of an argument, when checking your starter, it's your old starter, your new starter, here's the same idea, right? So that one was barely turning. You take the exciter wire here, or a key. So we're gonna turn our key on. See the difference? That's the torque we need to start a car. Now, before you go through the headache of installing this on your car, or trying to, you wanna make sure it's the same starter. So I like to lay them side by side. Like that. Right away I can see this looks a little bit different than mine, but for all intents and purposes it is the same. This is in the same location, and our connectors look the same. We have 2 on the side, 2 on there, 2 on there, 2 on there, 2, 2, 2, 2. So we're okay to install the starter. This is kind of, I'm not impressed with that, but we'll just make sure we don't knock it off. So taking this starter out was not the funnest job I would think of your pet cat giving birth. It's kind of how this starter came out. It took some twisting and turning and pulling, but it came out. So that's how this one's going to go in. It's going to be a bit of fun. Okay, so pretty much the opposite of when we took it out. We've got the starter back up in there now. It's just sitting there resting. And we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna put our bolt back in the bottom, bolt back on the top. I don't know the torque spec, just make sure they're tight. Use like a 3/8 ratchet or something, make sure they're nice and tight. And we'll go to the next step after that. Okay, so I put the starter connection back on. Something I should mention real quick is always use the supplied nut that comes with it. It could be a different thread pitch, different size. So this is the one that was originally on there. I put the new one on there. And an example would be, the one that came off, this is actually your 12 mil, that's a 13 mil. And that is a metric pitch. This is a standard pitch. So it's a good idea to use a supplied one. Just put the steering column back on. I did give it a shot at WD-40 to help it slide down just a little bit better. You can see my marks are lined up. And then we'll put our bolt back in and make sure it's tight. It might not even hurt if you do have access to a little bit of thread lock, to throw a little bit of blue thread lock, not red, blue thread lock on there, just to prevent this bolt from sliding out. It probably won't. This is kind of like spring loaded, but it could. Better safe than sorry. Okay, so the starter's in there. Now we have to put a steering column back on. You can see I did mark it. Now this would also be a good time to put the power supply wire back on the starter, because there's more room with the steering column out. Now there's no right or wrong way to do it. I'm going to put it back on right now because I do have that extra couple inches of room, and you know, size matters. So I'm going to throw it on quick, and then I'm going to put the steering column back together. All right, getting back into the car. Next step is our exciter wire. We're going to plug these two back in. You want to plug them in until you hear them click. Now, in the event you took this apart and maybe this connector broke on you or something, you can use a little dab of hot glue here or something to hold it in place. I like hot glue because if it ever has to come apart, you can just heat it up a little bit. I don't like super glue because it becomes part of it. So if you listen here, we should hear a click. Just kidding. Just like that. Did you hear that? A little click. Now it's in there. This should be secured to here. Mine broke on the back side, so I'm just going to wrap a zip tie around there to keep it in place. But should be good to go. You have a little tug after, make sure it's in there because you don't want it coming out. Otherwise, you're going to have a no start situation. Next step, negative cable. If you happen to put this on and you notice a big spark or something unusual, that's a bad sign. So we're going to tighten our 10 mil up. And last and final, most important step is make sure it works before you put it back on the ground, just in case you got a bad one, you got to take it out. Sounds good to me. And then pretty straightforward, put your wheel back on, remove your chocks, lower the car, take the e-brake off. Make sure you torque your wheel about 100 foot-pounds, that when you do want to torque. Make sure you re-torque it too after you drive it for about 50 kilometers, I don't know, 25 miles, whatever that is. Make sure you give it a re-torque, make sure everything's good. And that's it, guys. Nothing scary, pretty straightforward. I don't know. I'm not a smart guy. That took me about 30 minutes. So thanks for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe. I got more how-to videos always coming up. So we'll see you around.